it's Old Testament and not
I
New
don't.
Testament,
I'm sorry. I don't want to ask you to put something out there that you wouldn't have an opportunity to look at. But would you just in the last minute and a half that we have here? One of the things I'm sure you would admit, you even said in your book that you really weren't writing for someone coming from my perspective. You said
right.
You're speaking more to your fellow Arminian people who would. Wouldn't it strike you though, and as it strikes me, and I don't know how many Reformed folks you've talked to in the past about these particular issues, I'm sure a number, but wouldn't it strike you that, especially on issues like this, and especially since I read, for example, your article in Jets in June of 2002 in response to Bruce Ware, I think you can see where a lot of these issues interface. Mm-hmm. I don't see a lot of exegesis in this material of the issues that just jump up like John 6 to me and go, here's a big red flag. Mm-hmm. Just briefly in the few minutes, why do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, you and I definitely disagree on whether Scripture determines this issue. I think there are many issues in church history that Scripture is underdetermined. It is a range of views have been drawn out, and it's typical that people say, "Well, this is the only view. I mean, this is the right view." But on the unevangelized, I really don't believe that the Scriptures, pointedly ask the very question that we're asking and go after it. And so I have to work from themes. And clearly you and I are working from a set of different themes in Scripture, have come to different overarching models for how God works, who God is, and how God works in terms of salvation. But I can say that, all that the Father gives me, come to me. You see it as selecting, specific individuals, and I see it as a cooperation with the divine will, that the ones the Father has given the Son are the ones who turn to faith with the information, and this would include Abraham for me and Moses.
Okay, time. Thank you, gentlemen, for your cross-examination. We will now move on to the closing statements, beginning with the affirmative with Dr. Sanders. This will be followed by our questions from the floor. So if you have any questions, please prepare them now. Once again, please not enter debate. We'll begin our closing statements. Dr. Sanders.
Well, first of all, I'd like to answer a few of the questions, very fine questions that Dr. White raised. Why evangelize a Cornelius if he is already saved? Let me quote. This is a book I edited, but I want to quote one of the authors of this book, Ronald Nash. He says, Cornelius was a believer in the same sense as every believing Jew prior to Christ. So he says he was a believer. And now he doesn't elaborate on this particular question I'm going to raise now, but it seems to me then that if he's saying that if he would have died, if he'd had a coronary thrombosis prior to Peter's arrival, he would have been saved. Well, then, if he was already saved in that evangelical sense of the term, what does the gospel add? Why did God work so hard to get Peter there? A number of reasons. One, at this time, you must remember, the church is Jewish. Gentiles are not welcome unless they're willing to become Jewish. If you become Jewish, then you can benefit from a Jewish Messiah. And I think that what God is trying to say at this section of the book of Acts is that Genesis 12:3, that through Abraham there will be a blessing to all the peoples of the earth, that's coming about now. And God is drawing in Gentile peoples and they can have faith in Jesus without becoming Jewish. And that's one of the major issues in the book of Acts. So then when Peter says, well, you bring words of salvation in Acts 11 there, when Peter's reporting back to some people in Jerusalem saying, what were you doing with those Gentiles, and why were you sharing Christ with those Gentiles? So I would see the word salvation there used in a broader sense than getting one's ticket to heaven or whatever. Another point, I do think that both of us are answering yes to the question, even though it's affirmative, negative. I think you did say yes to this question. Is knowledge of the gospel necessary condition for salvation to those living after the time of Jesus? And it seems to me you did say, well, yeah, there are some people who were, like Nash says about this person, there are some people who were believers and were accepted by God, though they died not hearing about Jesus, even after Jesus had ascended. So then I think we are agreeing there. We're disagreeing as to how long that might continue, and we're disagreeing as to how much knowledge one has to have. So I would argue that even restrictivists hold that those faithful Jews who died shortly after the resurrection of Jesus were still saved, even though they did not know Jesus. So the issue becomes, when precisely is the cutoff line? 2 days after the resurrection? 2 months? 2 years? And on what grounds is the cutoff date decided? But whatever is decided here, restrictivists and inclusivists are agreeing that some adult unevangelized, they never heard of Jesus, who died after the time of Jesus are nonetheless saved without knowledge of the gospel of Jesus. So I would conclude from this that almost all Christians are answering our question as yes, people can be saved, adults, even apart from knowledge of Jesus. Now one may say, but wait a minute, just hold on here a second. Those people believed in the promises of God. They had special revelation, or they believed in the Messiah that was to come. Some such thing like that. Well, fine, and that's a very legitimate question to ask. But still, it would not detract from the fact that even restrictivists hold that adults have been saved without knowledge of Jesus. Okay.